Okay. Again, I'm trying to coordinate this. Little by little, I'm getting used to this. I emphasize little by little. And let's say a few words about Tisha B'Av coming up from Mishpacha Stefanski, as always, best friend of this podcast. And I was thinking about the famous Chazal, the Gemara, that says, you know it, that what was the reason of the destruction of Beis Hamikdash the second time? First time was Gila Rai Shvicha Dam Avodah Zarah, as we all know, the big three. But second time was one version is sinas chinam, and the other one is hamidu divrei adin Torah, that they insist on following the Torah, which at first glance doesn't seem to make sense, but usually it's understood as saying they didn't do lifnei mishur tzaddik. If you look at the Gemara there, it's in Bamitzia, page 30, and it's in the context of lifnei mishur tzaddik, and failing to do lifnei mishur tzaddik beyond the letter of the law, sticking exactly to the letter of the law, like the Pharisees that the Christians assail. And this was a big sin that caused the Churban Beis Hamikdash. And Rishonim, Tosfos, and others say, I thought, how come you say it's because of Hamidu Divrei Adin Torah? I thought it's because of Sinas Chinam. And Tosfos says, and others, it's all the same thing. No, it's two sides of the same coin. Ha b'ha. Two sides of the same coin. So, me, myself, and I, if you ever ask, what is the meaning, speaking historically, that the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam, it doesn't mean like some rabbi said, I don't like you, I have no reason not to like you. A girl says to another girl, I don't like the color of your hair, stupid things. Sinas chinam means, read Josephus, read Kamsa bar Kamsa. And there were civil wars among the Jews, as I've said many times. And I think, I've made this point often, more Jews were killed by other Jews in the war, the rebellion against Rome, at the time of Josephus, in other words, from the year 67, 68 till 70 or so, culminating in Tisha B'Av in the year 70. Group A of the Jews killed Group B, and so on and so forth, killing. And you will notice, as I say before, in extenso, from reading Josephus, which everybody should read at this time of year if you have the opportunity. I always quote from it. My custom is to quote from it in my shul when I do the explication of the kinos, which I hope to do the Sunday mornings I do every year. As I said, I hope it'll be live streamed. Every year we have trouble with the live stream. You can put it up after it's over, but I'm going to try to, hopefully the team will make it work this year. And the proper way to start the kinos is to read the passage from Josephus, in my opinion. After all, it's all I ever give. Before you begin the kinos, and he has a vivid, very depressing eyewitness, description of the Romans piercing the wall. I'm talking about of the Beis Hamikdash, and I've done this in podcasts before, so I'm not going to chazar it over now. But you see that this kind of civil war was extremely bloody, and it spun out crazy groups like the Sicarii, who even weren't in it, for a political reason, just were killers. And if you read the Gemara even, without Josephus, you will recall that they wanted to stab Yochanan ben Zakkai to make sure he's dead when the students carried him out, pretended he's dead. So Shelzafar, the Rav Moshe Feinstein at that time, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the guard, just to make sure he's not cheating, was going to stab him. What is that? How is someone driven to that level of savagery? Jews. The answer is it can happen. And that's called sinas chinam. Because what was the difference between Shimon bar Giora and his guys, and Yochanan Gushkalov of his guys, and the other generals, Elazar and Shimon, and all these other people that populate the highly detailed account of Josephus, which I think is pretty accurate. I know that he was in the Roman side and all that. I know the story. Having said that, and I've made this point many times, a lot of what you see in Josephus is true. I didn't say everything, but a lot of what you see is true. And you have a greater, more detailed description in his writings than you do anywhere else. But even if you tell me you're only going by the Gemara is the one who tells the story about stabbing Yochanan ben Zakkai. And the Gemara is the one who said that the Biryonim were at fault, and they said anyone who leaves the city will die, and all kind of crazy things like that. So we know, and you also know, by the way, what does it say, 40 years before the Churban, they stopped doing dinin nefashos, they stopped doing capital crimes because it was a crime wave and it got out of hand. And I want to talk about that actually. And you couldn't convict people anymore in the same way. And so the Sanhedrin gave up. So what does that mean when the highest law authority gives up? Imagine if the state, it'd be like California now, right? The state gives up on lo tignov. And unless you steal a velt of money, they're not even going to interfere. What is that? And the answer, of course, is there was a complete breakdown in Jewish society. I repeat, a complete breakdown in Jewish society, which reflected itself in the rise of untrammeled violence and crime. We see this all the time now in the Arab world, right? It's exactly what happened in Iraq. It's going on as we speak in Syria. It's going on as we speak in Lebanon. It was worse in the past. And other countries as well. Egypt is tottering on the brink of this. I may do a podcast about that if I find somebody. This is how it works in that part of the world. But hopefully Israel's not like that. And old days, I'm telling you right now, Israel was like that. And so that's what they mean by sinas chinam, civil war. Because if you go back, like I say in Chazal, and they're looking back, they say, what did this group fight over that group? And group A, group B, didn't make any sense in the big picture. But they didn't see it that way. And as you will perhaps recall, even when the Romans were besieging the city, the Jews continued to kill each other until like the last moment. So when the enemy was already on the 1 yard line, that's when you started, about to get a touchdown. That's when you started playing football. Obviously, you're going to lose. And yet, you have Rabbi Yochanan saying, Rabbi Yochanan lived in the 3rd century, so no, it's not that long afterwards, that it was because, not of sinas chinam, because Hamid Devarim al Din Torah, because he insisted on following the letter of the law. And what's wrong with that? Everybody should follow the letter of the law. So I think he's saying something very interesting over here. And that is, first of all, you can approach this from a Fermi point of view. And it makes a lot of sense. There's a famous Maral and others. Check it out. The Art School has it. Where the Maral says that Hashem said to the people like this, you're not going lifting Mishur Zadin? Then I won't. Which one of us, you and I, would like to be judged according to the Jewish religion, strictly on the mitzvahs and affairs we did? Which one of us doesn't yearn for getting some kind of a handicap score, right? Extra points, or something like that. Al tavo b'mishpat imanu ki lo yitzdak lefanecha kol choy. Don't we say that on Yom Kippur? Al tavo b'mishpat imanu. Don't come us with mishpat ki lo yitzdak lefanecha kol choy, because no one will survive pure mishpat. If you go strictly, notice if it's like a teacher, professor, gives the grades strictly and only on the test scores, it doesn't work for most people. They'll say, can I do an extra credit? Can I do this? How about classwork and all the rest of it? And I understand the reason why. So the Maral says, and others, I think the Shvus Yankov, if I remember correctly, that since you were Mamid al Din Torah and you didn't go lifting the Mishur Zadin when you dealt with each other, everybody demanded exactly what's coming to them and wouldn't be Mavatar on anything. So Hashem said, well, I'll judge you the same way. And if you judge it the same way, then the Beis HaMikdash is worthy of a Churban. Because when you balance the mitzvahs and the Averos together, the Averos come out ahead, and therefore you're worthy of a Churban. That's a nice vart. I mean it. The Maral doesn't need me to back him up, but it's a good vart. And it reflects a religious truism, and fine. However, I think there's something bigger going on, or equally big. I shouldn't say bigger. You can't get bigger than what I just said. You can't get bigger than Maral because it has to do with your life, little and bud. But also big in you. And that strikes me, naturally being myself, I look from a historical point of view. It's just interesting to me that what happens right after Tisha B'Av? What happens right after the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed? You begin the period of Rabbinic Judaism. In other words, the Tanaim kick in. We're not getting into the Doros Rishonim, detailed technicalities of when exactly the Tanaim start. But basically speaking, the process of reducing Jewish law to a text in one form or another, which they were very reluctant to do. And I know all that. But nevertheless, the process of systematizing and reducing Jewish law to text or formula, whether written text or oral text, perhaps, as Shvira Gon says, begins with the destruction of Beis HaMikdash. It really does. And so who are the guys that are involved leading the charge after, the Churban Beis Hamikdash, the first generation of Tanaim, all the guys that show up in the Passover Seder in Bnei Brak that you read in the Haggadah, plus Rabbi Gamliel. So it's Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Elazar Azariah, Rabbi Shua, all the Rabbi Gamliel, if you throw them in also, Rabbi Tarfon, and so on and so forth, right? Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shua, and some others. But these are the central core players. And what are they engaged in? Even Rabbi Shiragon says they tried to clarify what was unclear and systematize and make sure the traditions they heard were reliable by cross-examining different trade-ins, as they call them, and, things of that nature. So obviously that was a reaction to the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Now, you can sit there and simply say, yeah, everything was destroyed, so the old institutions were gone, and that is true. And so now they feel they have to go and put the pieces together as best they can. And, that's a good point. However, it seems to me that it's connected with, we just said before, which is Hamida Devrei Al Din Torah. The insistence of following the letter of the law. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Precisely that, there was no Torah Shabbat Peh, in the sense that what I mean is nothing fixed. It was the old system of Torah Shabbat Peh, which means the law is kind of unclear. And the primacy is given to the Torah teacher. This is the Ger Shiragon. And how do I learn me? How would I learn Hilchos Shabbos if I wanted to? I would apprentice myself to a known Talmud Chacham, known Hilchos Shabbos, and follow them around for maybe years, and see what they do in a whole variety of situations, and discuss every case that they had. So what we call shimush, okay? Which is different than text learning you have in yeshiva, obviously. That's why guys, when they get married, usually go to kolos where they have halacha chaburas, which is the right thing to do. But we live in an entirely different time when we're text-bound. They weren't text-bound. And so, I'm following what Tosa says over here. It was an era when you had, maybe it's me talking, I'm not sure. He says, you had a lot of sinas chinam. So forget the political interpretation that I gave before, although I think it's true, but you're not going to find that political interpretation reflected in the rabbinic literature. You got the Maral, the Chassam Sofer, Shus Yaakov, Pnei Yeshu, all those type of people, they ain't coming from no Josephus point of view. They're thinking internally within the realm of discourse in rabbinic literature. And therefore, what you find is, first of all, the approach of Maral, and second of all, it seems to me, you find the idea that first come to sinas chinam, I don't like you, but it's sinas chinam, I have no reason not to like you. So in my opinion, Libi Amrli, if I didn't like you, and I had no good reason, I wouldn't talk to you about it. You understand? We're all like that. I see this person or this other thing. It's a turnoff. The Gemara talks about people who are turnoffs, right? Some people are turn-ons and some people are turn-offs. Could be a whole bunch of reasons. Now, if you did something wrong to me, that's a different story, but I'm not talking about that. Sinas chinam in a plain meaning means, you're a turn-off. I'm not going to go over to somebody and say you're a turn-off to me. I'm not that stupid. But I'll just keep that in my heart. You see, if you did something to me, if you cheated me in business, if you banged up my car and drove away, if you, said something bad about me to others, then the proper way to be is I go over to you and say, I don't like what you did. I always call it the Yekish of virtues, right? I like you. I don't like you. I know where you stand. But life isn't like that. And in point of actual fact, if I have a sinas chinam case, I'll keep it to myself. And let's say, for example, I have a neighbor who I don't like. Could be all kind of reasons. Maybe they dress in a way that I don't like. I don't mean tznius-wise. The guy wears blue shirts and I have a mishigas against blue shirts. Yeah, it could be anything, right? I don't like the way they stack up their garbage cans. That's a sinas chinam. It's their property. They can do what they want. It's not hurting the neighborhood values, anything like that. It's sinas chinam. But it's my neighbor. So 99 out of 100 times, I ain't going to say nothing to the guy. But I'll have that bad feeling in my heart to myself. And so if I ever deal with that individual, I'm going to deal in the straight and narrow. It's going to be Hamida Devrei Al Din Torah. If he owes me money, I ain't giving him up nothing, spotting him any money. You owe me $65.45. I want every penny. That's how people are, right? If you step 1 inch on my property, a half an inch, I'm going to go and make a whole thing about it. Now, I didn't do anything wrong in the sense that I didn't go to your property, and I didn't go and challenge your property rights, and I didn't do anything to hurt you. You don't want to hurt me, okay? If you want to regard that as a hurt. And I'm not mechuyev to go and say, hey, you're nice, you have a quarter of an inch on my property, please remove it, and so on and so forth. If I was nice, I'd go lift the insurance and be mavater and say, all right, quarter of an inch doesn't matter. You know? Better that than to start a fight. But if I'm going, Hamida Maldim Torah, according to the law, it's my property, which it is, right? And so forth. One other example, I'm in Shul. These are just coming to my mind. And I brought a sefer to Shul. Happens to me sometimes. And somebody goes over, usually a kollel guy sometimes, when they're asking me any permission, picks it up and uses it, sits down and reads it. I'm not such a schmo, but I'm entitled, I'm entitled to say, you never shus, you don't have permission to take my book. I didn't give you permission. As a matter of fact, I don't like what you did. If you would come and ask me nicely, maybe I would say yes. But you just assumed the whole world is your oyster, and everything I have is yours, and so on and so forth. And that's it. By the way, this has happened to me. I've even put books for him sometimes inside my box, and I've seen guys come open the box and take it out. Now, in real life, I'm not going to freak out over this. And in real life, I'll say, I guess, all right. In other words, I'm going to be mavater. You see, not because I'm a tzaddik. Don't pay. Normal people don't freak out over things like that, as far as I know. Plus, it helps social relations, that people shouldn't go and be makbid on one another. That's true, especially in a shul. Okay, but I have the right to do that. Now, if I conduct myself the whole time like that, then I'm going to be in the shul, and this guy's going to be shul, let's say repeatedly, and I'm going to keep my hands off of his stuff, he's going to keep my hands off of that stuff. You're going to feel the tension in the air, even though we don't talk to each other, we don't criticize each other, we don't do anything bad at each other. But there's like Gova Torah Benim, there's a certain tension out there, and we are both praying in the same building, but we're not really a tzibur. You understand? So it's a false type of achdus. By that I mean it's the absence of active quarrel, but it's also the absence of any kind of unity. And the Torah apparently didn't have that in mind. Torah didn't have that in mind. And here I'm reminded of what I mentioned the other day, the Drasha Saran, who says that the Mishpat HaMelech is there in case the Torah laws don't work. If the public is taking advantage of the Torah laws and using all kind of tricks and shticks to circumvent them, like I said before, if I want to midaraisa, I could kill you using grama if you know how to do that. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Minatorah, you can get away with it. What kind of crazy law is that? So it's assumed nobody's going to go and use that loophole. If they did, and Samson Rabbi Hirsch has something about this in 19 letters, by the way. If they did, then we're going to invoke the king's law, according to the Drasha Saran. And we'll say, maybe according to that, you're not chayav, but if you kill somebody with a remote control device using groma and all the rest of it, we're going to kill you. Because we're not going to allow the breach of the social contract through technicalities. Because the social contract can be breached by technicalities. That's what it is. You understand? That's what it is. We have this problem in the United States today by the abuse of free speech. You have free speech where people can say all kinds of terrible things on the internet, which is not regulated. And there's often no consequences. Right? So that breaches social contract because it introduces a pirud, division among the population, where really, 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 it should be the goal of every country to have the population as united as possible. Okay? Which is particularly a trick in a polyglot democracy like ours. Got to have what you can to encourage positive vibes among different groups. It may not totally translate into everyday life, but at least it sets the right tone. It's what I call the old TV, as I said 100 times. Used to be 3 channels before the internet started, and all channels are federally regulated. And you couldn't have a show that promoted a disharmony among any groups, right? You never would hear anything on the old shows. I'm not saying they were great shows. As Newton Minow said to President Kennedy, it's a vast wasteland. Okay, fine. But at least it wasn't a harmful wasteland in the sense it didn't provoke bad vibes among different people. Nothing bad about black people, nothing bad about Jews, nothing bad about Catholic people, nothing bad about this. That's not where you went. It's not where you went. So, and you had greater social harmony in this country. I don't say it was perfect, obviously not, but broadly speaking, you had social harmony. Today, it's under strain. And the guy on the internet can say like this, an imam is dvar al din Torah. An imam is dvar al divrei Constitution. Constitution of the United States says I have free speech. And the internet is unregulated, so I'm not breaking any laws. I'm just saying free speech. You understand? I'm just saying free speech. And you know how it goes, even you can't, maybe the courts say you can't go and advocate violence. I'm not saying I'm advocating violence. I think this particular group is terrible, and what they're doing is outrageous, and we all be better off without them. But I'm not advocating for violence. So you circumvent this sort of thing, and that's what I think Chazal mean when they say "Haminim al Divreim al Din Torah," that since there was a lot of sinas chinam, people disliked each other, maybe for partisan political reasons, and from the point of view of Chazal, you have to understand, partisan political reason would be defined as sinas chinam. Tell you what I mean. From the point of view of Chazal, suppose I'm an Orioles fan and you're a Yankees fan, and I hate you because you're a Yankees fan. That'd be sinas chinam. It's not true. I have a reason. I like this team, and I'm emotionally invested in it, and you like that team. That's a shtus. That's not a real reason. You understand? Suppose somebody's a Democrat, the other's a Republican, and I hate you because you're a Republican, or vice versa. That's a shtus. You understand? People can have different political opinions, and you can even have strong ones, but not to the point that you hate the other person. If you do hate the other person, it's a sinas chinam. So you have to be sure if you hate somebody, you have a good reason. Okay? I have a good reason to hate Hitler. You get it? I get that. And it's not as simple as I'm saying, because a Shomer Shabbos should hate a non-Shomer Shabbos or vice versa. No, but it's a little bit different there. You understand? It's a complex subject, but nevertheless, Chazal would designate these sorts of things, generally speaking, as sinas chinam. So in the ancient times, in the time of Bayesheni, you had different sectarian groups. And even, it's not simple as the Pharisees versus Sadducees, because a lot of these groups that killed each other were Pharisee groups. So as we say to the Orthodox Jews could go and kill each other because they have a certain sinas chinam, because I follow this leader and you follow that leader. Like today you say, I guess I follow this Rebbe and you follow that Rebbe. Today we're not holding by that level of sin, but they were at that time, back in the time of Beis Hamikdash. So, what does that mean? Hamina Divrei al Din Torah, the Chassam Sofer says this, is a taino on the judges, on the poskim, because they should not have allowed people to just mami Divrei al Din Torah. They should have pushed actively for ameliorating the hatred between the groups. So it shouldn't be that I go to Beis Din against you, and really I hate your guts because you put a quote, you're an Orioles fan, I'm a Yankees fan, or whatever, and therefore I insist on Din Torah and all the rest of it. And the Dayanim felt like this: your personal quarrels are your business. We're here just to judge the Choshen Mishpat side of it. And according to the Choshen Mishpat side of it, this one wins and this one loses, or something like that. That was a failure on the part of the courts, because the idea of the courts is a narrow meaning and a larger meaning. The narrow meaning is to apply the law in this case. The larger meaning is to promote the social harmony. Law and politics is defined as nonviolent conflict resolution. You know what I just said? Nonviolent conflict resolution. So a court system that doesn't promote that, but rather accommodates to the hatreds and doesn't encourage, best it can, the litigants to be mavater to some on this point or in that point, and come up with a verdict which in the end promotes the larger goal of social harmony. Apparently God doesn't like that, right? Because that's why it's sort of the Beis Hamikdash, according to Rabbi Yochanan. And many Divrei al Din Torah, they insist on going exact by a letter of law, and that's because I hate you. I'm not going to say why, because it's a sinas chinam, I'm ashamed to say I hate you because you're a Yankees fan. So I'm just going to say like this: I'm following the din, but of course I got a lawyer, and he advised me go after this and this nakud in the law. What's really generating is my dislike for you. So then the law, the Torah, becomes an aider and abetter of social disharmony, which is perverting and reversing what the Torah is supposed to be about. So the Torah is supposed to be about, above all, promoting social harmony, promoting the Achdus. So long ago, in the time of the Bayis Sheni, when there wasn't laws on the books, because the Torah Shabbal Peh was still a Torah Shabbal Peh, the oral law was still an oral law, so the courts, the Beis Dins, were not bound by any code of law. There was no Mishnah Torah or Shulchan Aruch or anything like that. So which is just interesting. I mean, that's a whole discussion. I'm not going to take 2 hours on it now. But read Shviragam, right? Yidigar Shviragam, which I translate, by the way, for the art school. So really, primacy was placed on the personality, you might say, of the posek, of the judges, of the legislators, and or the judiciary, and they're supposed to guide the legal ruling in the end, not simply by the law, but that it should come out that everybody's happy to the degree that's possible. It's not always possible. The degree it's possible. If you accommodate the other guy's insistence on following the letter of the law, even though you know it's going to say like this, okay, the Orioles fan is going to win, but the Yankees fan is going to walk away with a hatred times 10 because he lost to this guy. You understand? And yes, today he won, but the result is, how should I put it? Watch this. Like I said before, two neighbors get into a quarrel, and somebody put something on the other guy's property, something like that, whatever, and they go to court, and the court says, okay, the Orioles guy wins, the Yankees guy loses, the two neighbors, and the Yankees guys has to pay $500 as a payment to the Orioles fan. So justice was done, but they'll never talk to each other again. You see? So the court can say like this: that's not my business. That's how the American secular courts operate. We apply the law. Whether you like each other or talk to each other or not, it's not our business. You see? In Jewish law, it's not like that. If you give a psak, and the result is a cold, and maybe hot, but cold hatred that will never abate, it wasn't a successful psak halacha. What do you mean? We follow what the Choshen Mishpat says, and in this case, it's a malva and a lova, a mazik and a nizik. It's this one and that one, and this is the way it works. This one's tying to this, and that one tying to this. Hilchos Toim V'Nittin, and according to this guy won. You made it worse, because the result of this, they'll hate each other, and their children will hate each other, and you create a tremendous period. And what'd you gain? Right? Now, you and I know there are many families in which one family member doesn't talk to the other, or maybe whole members of family A doesn't talk to their cousins of family B. Why? Because once upon a time, long ago, or short ago, somebody did something that offended the other one. And particularly if they ever ended up going to Beis Din, and one won and the other one lost, they ain't coming in their bar mitzvahs or weddings. They're not going to celebrate, and they're not going to be friends with each other. You simply say like this: I don't talk to that group. They live in the West Coast. I have nothing to do with them. But it's your brother. It's your son. It's your cousin. Yes, I know, but I don't really have a relationship with them. That's the word you say nowadays. I don't have a relationship with them. So then you have a tremendous period. This, therefore, means that the Hamida Dim al Divrei Torah was a result of the sinas chinam. And I think that's what Tosfos means when they say ha b'ha, the elu v'elu, that both of these factors combined to bring about the Churban of Beis Hamikdash. I don't think it means just combined in the sense that you had one plus the other, but one led to the other. And so this is a tricky business nowadays, because I don't know how Beis Din is going to operate. Maybe they'll say, let justice be done though the heavens fall, and let the, Yikov Adin is a har, and the heck with the loser. But it seems to me, sitting here in the 9 days before Tisha B'Av, that Beis Din has maybe a higher responsibility. Now, that's why they get the big bucks, right? It's a high responsibility, and the goal at the end is not for the litigator, the defendant, or the plaintiff, but for the situation. Brandeis, the famous judge, used to say, "I'm a lawyer for the situation." You see? Like he would have a client and they were dealing with a labor union. He said, "I want to come up with the best compromise because of the situation I represent." So even though he's paid by his employer. So same thing over here. They had to look at the situation, and I think they did. At least that's the way it strikes me. Just wanted to share that thought now before Tisha B'Av, of course. And maybe I'll have time to do another one, I'm not sure. But as always, I want to thank Mishpachas Stefanski for the constant friendship and support. And as I say, I hope the live stream will be up on Sunday morning. I hope. I hope it'll work. And just go to my YouTube website. I'm sure we'll have the thing up there, the URL. Or just easier, just go to my synagogue, Beth Abraham, Baltimore. If you Google Beth Abraham, Baltimore, you'll see it, and we'll put it up on the front page. Anyway, with that, I wish you all a good day and an easy fast.